Hi, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. We won't be joined by Dee Pierce tonight because she isn't feeling well, I regret to say. So it's going to be just me holding down the fort. Our topics for tonight are BRICS War 3. That doesn't mean the third war on BRICS. It just means the third installment of the Pepe Escobar video on the BRICS War. The second, our topics, is Israel collapse, question mark. Third topic is Brinkmanship. I misspelled it as Brinksmanship. The fourth topic is whether there's a betrayal of MAGA going on. Sorry about that. And the fifth topic is the topic of the use of directed improvisation by the Chinese in trying to make some of their goals come true. I'm going to ask you to wait just a minute while I promote this on Twitter. I'm going to take a minute, and get some big attendance here. Okay, thank you very much for waiting. I see we don't have any comments yet. So I'm going to go on with the first of our topics. I've already shared this on Facebook, so I don't have to worry about sharing it on Facebook. So let's take a look at this video, part 3 of the Pepe Escobar video on the Danny Haifang show.
And everything that was actually decided in.
Sorry, that's in the wrong place. I thought I set it up correctly earlier, but it seems to have a mind of its own. So let me get to the place where I wanted us to start.
It's a non.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you.
Situation. And, this little column that I wrote was just trying to give you a little warning about the highway to hell ahead,
Pepe, maybe we could end on centering the maybe the hottest highway to hell that is currently still raging, and that is, of course, the conflict in Ukraine. Of course, we had Donald Trump. You are very well aware of his 50-day ultimatum, if we were to call it. Right. And, of course, this came with promises of new patriots. We see this happening, patriot systems. We have Germany giving 5. Many of these are not even operational. They are undergoing some kind of routine of inspection, actually. So who knows when they actually will enter the battlefield, let alone eventually get destroyed on the battlefield. But there's another detail I want you to comment on here, not in that we have this 50-day ultimatum. It's going to happen as this meeting that's going to occur between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping I believe, is going to go to Moscow, or is Putin going to Beijing? I don't know which one it is, but no, I think Putin's.
The 50-day ultimatum, of course, is no longer around or relevant because Trump changed it to a 10 to 12-day ultimatum. And then things started getting really hot because of an incident that we'll cover later on in the show. But please keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this video.
Going to go to Beijing
Yes,
to celebrate
September 3, Danny.
the anniversary.
September 3 commemoration anniversary of the Second World War, and Putin has been officially invited to go, and it's practically certain that he will go. And it's interesting because September 3 is the day. It's when the Vladivostok Forum starts in the Far East, in the Russian Far East. This is very important. So this means I'm looking at Putin's schedule because he usually speaks at Vladivostok.
Just by chance, September 3rd, is the wedding anniversary of Bonnie and myself. And it's our 59th.
Vladivostok on the last day, or in the plenary session. So he'll be in Beijing on the 3rd. He'll fly. Oh, it's not very far. Vladivostok and Beijing is less than 4 hours. No, 2.5 hours, in fact. So on the 4th, he'll be back in Vladivostok. Makes sense. It's total sense, and it's neighbors. The whole thing makes sense. So we can count on Putin in Beijing on September 3. No question.
Yeah, talk about where. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, go ahead, because your question. Sorry.
Yeah. No. I was going to ask Pepe if you could comment on where this conflict is now, given that there are also rumors that Donald Trump, and I don't know if I can believe these rumors at all with any kind of validity. Rumors that Donald Trump may go to China around this time, and supposedly Russia, Peskov, has said that they're not ruling out a meeting with Donald Trump during this major event. What's your take on this? And maybe if we can talk about the conflict a bit, where it's at, since it's been a bit since we've spoken.
Well, if that happens, can you imagine that Yalta 2.0 will take place in Beijing? Wow. I think many of us were writing about Yalta 2.0 months ago. Many of us. I think I did at least 2 or 3 columns about that. So can you imagine? Trump will be ceding the prime time to Xi Jinping, in fact.
Teenagers are building businesses with AI, while the only AI is ChatGPT. Let's be real. Most people.
And this is something that Trump would never do willingly. But that's the fact. If you have a Yalta 2.0 and it's in the Chinese capital, it's the big dragon that is hosting. It's the big dragon that is setting the agenda. So for the moment, of course, all rumors. And Peskov, I like the way Peskov has sneaked out of it. It's up in the air. Anything can happen. Well, the war. Okay, I'll get a better handle when I go back to Russia. I usually prefer to talk about the war when I am in Russia. And it would be good to get the Russian Far Eastern perspective in less than 5 weeks from now or so, But at the moment, they are doing what Russians do. They can launch a mega offensive if they want in summer. They can conquer virtually every latitude that they want along the front line in the next few weeks or months. And considering that the BlackRock chancellor in Germany has almost declared war against Russia, and he wants to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, of course, not to the first Germans. But this will be sending a message to the BlackRock chancellor in Germany and to the Anglo-French-German pact, which is basically a new pact to, okay, sooner or later, we're going to start Operation Barbarossa 2.0. What are they calling the Kensington Treaty? So this is where we are at the moment.
So that's an agreement to go fight with Russia at some point. I mean, they don't know when they're going to go fight with Russia, but they're kind of agreeing to ally to fight with Russia at some time in the future. Why are they going to go fight with Russia? Well, of course, they're Russophobic, we know that, but it also has to do with the war on BRICS, because BRICS is creating a situation where Europe is becoming a backwater. And so Europe also has an interest in disturbing the war on BRICS, or disturbing the development of BRICS, and it will certainly do that if it directly fights a war with Russia. So there it is.
But of course, the Russians they are always looking at the chessboard in detail. So they are putting all these pieces together. Not to mention studying the complications in for the moment, 6 fronts against Russia, and soon maybe 7, 8, 9. So it's tough. So it's a matter of time for the Security Council in Russia now. They can go for I would say a mega lethal blow in the next few months, and then in case Circle's ringmaster picks up the phone, Putin can say, okay, that's it. You have our lethal blow. We can stop, or we can continue with extra lethal blows, and then we can sit down and finalize this deal. Or if you don't, we'll keep doing what we're doing, more lethal blows. And obviously, this discussion will be strictly between Washington and Moscow. There is no Europe, because Europe is irrelevant. It's a sideshow. It's a side player. Yeah. And obviously, try to explain that to BlackRock Chancellor. Absolutely impossible. And they keep doubling down. Yeah, and they will keep doubling down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in your article, Pepe, about the 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for, NATO wars, you write here, when Sergei Shoigu outlined the encirclement, the way that NATO, Europe in big part, but of course the U.S. backing it, 50,000 tanks, 7,000 combat aircraft, 750 warships, 350 military and civilian satellites, an immense offensive budget. But then you noted here, and I think this is what makes it seems like the U.S. and NATO's aggressive stance against Russia more and more relevant, is that there's Mr. Kinjal, Mr. Sarmat, Mr. Zircon, and Mr. Reshnik ready to go, which
yes,
speak to this reality.
Exactly. In all these NATO projections of war or threats by the Germans, by British generals, etc., you never see any mention about Russian retaliation. Never. So obviously they know that there will be retaliation, and they know that if they go on with their plans, the retaliation is going to be absolutely lethal. And the Russians, they don't need to advertise what they have. Everyone with a brain knows what they have. But the problem is that day by day, and with this series of provocations that they are stacking up the provocations, and sooner or later they're going to start unleashing some of them. Kaliningrad, from now on, is a mega red alert, no question. Crimea, including the bridge, another major red alert. And of course, long-range missiles inside assets of the Russian Federation, including civilian assets, or against Moscow. That's another major red alert. If you have one attack against Moscow, against one of those towers in Moscow City, for instance, with civilian casualties in Moscow's business center, then maybe we could say that that's it. The straw that breaks the camel's back. We know how Putin thinks. We know how the Security Council, they base their decisions. You know how they are legalistic. You know how they are immensely patient and all that. And NATO, they will keep, trying to the ultimate provocation. And we can be sure that the ultimate provocation will arrive, maybe sooner rather than later. And that's what makes the whole situation so volatile, right?
Yeah, it makes it so volatile, and I think that's what also makes it significant that while the weapons transfers that the U.S. has turned back on under Trump are maybe pitiful in terms of the actual impact now, it does signify this continuation of what many, Pepe. I mean, how many people have spoken to both of us about their hopes that Donald Trump would pull back from this thing? And now we are essentially in Biden era territory. So much in Biden era territory that it's right on that line of where Biden ended, which was threatening and maybe even greenlighting deep attacks into Russia, which will, of course, lead to this retaliation, which Russia has been immensely patient over, especially in the Trump era. So your thoughts on this, and I have an audience question for you to close.
Well, the Ukraine war is his war now, Danny. Everybody knows that. The Iran war and the war against the axis of resistance is his war now. The war against BRICS is his war now. And he already lost a war. The US Navy was immensely humiliated with no return by the Houthis. Right. So this is Trump's breakdown after 6 months, roughly 6 months in power. There you go.
Yeah, which is stunning in the set when we look at the list of the Trump. It's only been 7 months, 6-7 months, and we have trade war, China fail, war on Ansarallah, the Houthis fail. We have the Ukraine negotiations basically over at this point. We have, as I said before, Biden era now, escalations with Russia, and the Iran situation, which, as you said, it's just a cessation of hostilities. It's very much in play, and Donald Trump himself continues to threaten what would be.
It takes 90 seconds for this NASA-engineered AC cool down your room. It's smaller than a toaster.
Another act of war, which could very well lead to the big war. And this is what we have. It's incredible how things have devolved, and I think many people got taken by the rhetoric. They really got taken by rhetoric, which is dangerous when you live in the United States.
Just one.
Yes, of course.
Practically an afterthought, Danny. How to get eaten up and disgorged by the swamp, not only once, but twice.
Twice. And the second time, a lot faster. Because,
yeah, a lot faster.
And now I think we're in a moment, Pepe, where the question has to be asked, is Trump just the swamp?
Okay, I don't think it's so much a question of getting eaten up and disgorged by the swamp as it is simple, maybe not so simple, conceptual confusion. Trump went into negotiations with Russia, seemingly without a clear idea of what the Russians had to have in order to conclude a peace agreement. And even though they tried to communicate with him time after time after time to make it clear what they needed to actually come to agreement, he insisted on continuing to believe that purely through the force of his own personality, he would be able to get Putin to somehow change his mind about the vital interests of Russia, and would end up compromising those vital interests in favor of a frozen conflict that where over a period of time the United States would be able to continue to try to break down the structure, okay, of Russia with a new Cold War. Of course, Russia is not having any. They want to get at the root causes of this conflict and solve the root causes or cause of this conflict. And the root cause of this conflict happens to be the desire of NATO and the United States to surround Russia, to harm grievously or break up the Federation. That is the long-term goal. That is the cause of this war. And Trump seemed to want to perpetuate that situation. He was willing to freeze the conflict. He was willing to have ceasefires. But basically, he was trying to maintain the underlying conditions, and he believed he could get Putin to do that. Of course, he hasn't been able to move Putin on that at all. What Putin wants is for NATO to once again become a defensive organization rather than an offensive organization, and to stop surrounding Russia. But Trump isn't willing to give that to Putin, and that's why there is no agreement today. And I think if Trump thinks he can force Putin into this with conventional weapons, he's sadly mistaken, because the U.S. is out of conventional weapons and doesn't have the capability that Russia has to stop the conquest of Ukraine by Russia, which is coming closer and closer now. It's probably only a month away. We're probably a month away from a situation where the Russians will have conquered Kharkiv and turned it back into Kharkov. They will also have the province of Dnipropetrovsk, hard to pronounce that. And also Nikolaev, and Odessa. 4 more of the oblasts, really doubling the territory that they were of the first 4 oblasts that they annexed. And Russia will annex the next 4 then fairly soon. And maybe then they will be willing to stop, but maybe not, if there are any fighting forces against them that is still left.
And of course, with the Epstein scandal, I think that just poses that question even more in a more direct nature, right? Because it's like, look at how he's reacted to that. That's an expose. But you can comment on this and this, because I think this question actually gets to this. We were talking about where Trump gets his information from Lindsey Graham, when we know that he lies. And so Sparky asked, if Tulsi Gabbard was Trump's golf buddy, wouldn't it be better? What's your
Well, Tulsi Gabbard, she has to come up with little Fox News tidbits or excerpts so she can grab Trump's attention. Tulsi Gabbard is a rational player. Okay, with her own limits, but she's a rational player. Lindsay whatever is a liar. It's much easier, you know. Well, the company
He should have been more polite and called him a prevaricator.
you keep. I think I don't need to add anything to that, right?
Yeah. Well, Pepe, the last thing I want you to comment on then, as we close our segment together, is bringing this all together, bringing the fact we have Tulsi Gabbard. She brought out the RussiaGate kind of hammer.
Yes.
But at the same time, we also have that maybe posing as a little bit of a distraction from the Epstein scandal. But what I think is the big story and what we cover on this channel is...
First, you get the new MegaFlow system, our top-of-the-line flagship countertop.
That the Trump administration's desperation appears to be part of this almost unmovable force of the U.S.'s empire, this empire of chaos, as you call it, moving toward a war that it not only cannot win, but might destroy itself. So your final thoughts on this as we close our time together.
I will develop this into a column. I just finished reading a very flawed book about world orders. His main argument is correct. Basically, he says that have been several world orders across history. Egypt, the Roman Empire, Pax Mongolica, of course, the British Empire, the Americans, which lasted, 75, 80 years, not much. And the next one is certainly going to be a world order where the global south has preeminence. Of course, because this book was written by an Indian guy teaching international relations at the American University in Washington. I think I don't need to add anything else to his biases and, of course, the stuff that he could not say. Otherwise, he will never get published in the US. But the breakdown, the historical breakdown that he is involved in when he's talking about ancient Greece, about Rome, about India, China, not so much because he obviously doesn't understand China. And the West, and the rise of the West and the West against the rest, which is a completely stupid expression, in fact. It's now, what is now leading is that the rest is not the rest. The rest is the majority, and the rest is dictating what's going to happen from now on. The West has now become the rest. And the West, I say North America and that Western peninsula of Eurasia, Europe. Eurasia is back on the saddle. And if we look at history, at the flow of history, Eurasia was always at the saddle of the flow of history for everywhere except 2.5 centuries. The last 230 to 240 years, let's put it this way. But now that's over. Now history is back to how it was running its course before. The most important civilizations, the greatest contributions to history, to culture, to religion, etc. They all came from all across Eurasia. And from now on, we're going to have a new geopolitical, geoeconomic realignment where Eurasia is going to be at the heart of it, at the center of it. Much to the absolute displeasure of the Anglo-American gang, even before Mackinder, at the height of the British Empire in the late 19th, they said that, this ruling the waves for them, the thalassocratic empire, British style and then American style, will be forever. No. It lasted overall, back to back, including both, a century. What is a century in world history? Nothing. So it's quite refreshing for all of us to re-study for instance, what Greece learned from Egypt, for instance. The fact that for many of Islam's cultural achievements, it would have been impossible for the Renaissance and Enlightenment to exist without these Islamic cultural and scientific achievements. It's good to come back and see that world orders succeed each other, and nothing is static in history, like that absolutely stupid configuration of the end of history that we had only yesterday in historical terms. No, now it's a different ball game, and the different ball game has already started. And that's what's leading these Anglo-American elites to total despair. You cannot argue with the flow of history. You just look at where history is. You don't need to be a Bob Dylan weatherman to see which way the wind of history is blowing. It's very, very simple, you know. We saw that in Kazan last year. We saw this in Rio a few days ago. And, you know, NATO, superimposed NATO wars, it's not going to alter anything. You can send 1 million Patriots or THAADs or whatever to Ukraine. It's not going to change anything. You can launch 10 million tariffs against China. It's not going to change anything. But, you know, but that's what makes them even more dangerous, Danny, and all of you, our audience. You all know that. We all know that they will be much more dangerous tomorrow compared to today. And we all have to deal with it.
Indeed. Pepe, it's great to have you on the program. I have your Telegram and your X account in the video description, as well as your latest article on strategic culture on NATO's war on BRICS. Everyone check that out as Pepe heads up. But we have a lot more show here to go. Pepe, I'll have to get in touch with you very soon. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
So that's it for this video. It was a very significant one, and I had to do it in 3 parts because it was quite long. But these last comments from Pepe about the sweep of history, I'm not sure I entirely agree with the determinism that is implied here, but certainly with the population of China and its civilizational capability, okay, it is a fact. Okay, it is a fact that sooner or later, if we avoided a nuclear war, that China was going to develop and become increasingly powerful. Okay, and so that's a situation which we have to cope with. We would have had to cope with sooner or later anyway. But of course, it should be quite clear to everybody that the actions of the United States, good evening, Greg Mallard, the actions of the United States, first of all, in doing so much to build up China in the first place, providing China with so much business, shifting a good part of our manufacturing capability over to China. We didn't have the wit in foreign policy to stop our capitalists from doing that. That was a big boost, okay, to the development of China and to the shifting of power. One other big boost to the shifting of power was when Russia wanted basically to join the West to get into the EU, to get into NATO at one point around the turn of the century. We, the United States, blocked them, didn't want them there because we were afraid of a rivalry from Russia. So he missed the chance of including Russia in the West. That would certainly have been something which would have, I think lengthened the time. Well, it wouldn't have contributed so much to the decline of the West, the rapid decline of the West, and decline of the United States, which we are seeing right now. So I think there were very critical mistakes which were made by the United States and made by the West in general, which has created the situation we see now, where it seems that we have an inevitable force that is moving history towards the global South and also to the IRC alliance of Russia, Iran, and China. Evelina says Europe is a sideshow, all right, a circus, yeah. Part of the reason why it's a circus is it doesn't want to trade. It doesn't want to trade with Russia. It wants to fight with Russia instead. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Dooming itself to austerity because it doesn't want to use the Russian oil. Evelina says Europe is a sideshow, all right, a circus. Greg Mallard says, good evening, Joe. Evelina says, solidarity with the ordinary people of Europe facing austerity plans of corrupt, warmongering elite. Exactly. Gregory Mallard says, friggin' ads. Joe, your camera is frozen. I know the camera is frozen, but I don't know how to unfreeze it except to refresh the page, and I'm sure I will be, if I think there's a possibility if I do that, I'm going to lose the stream. So what I'm going to do instead, since I now have 16,281 people, viewing the stream. Oh, he says, Gret says, turn the camera off and then turn the camera back on. Well, that's probably good advice. I'll see if I can do that. Well, there we go, but it didn't seem to make a difference. So, anyway, since you can hear me, since I'm still doing the show, and since I'm doing videos, if you can see the videos, I'm just going to continue talking. So now we're going to move to the second of the videos, on the second of our topics, which is Israel on the brink of collapse. So let me share the screen for that. Okay. That is also in the wrong place, so let me get that back to the beginning.
When they say it can't be done, we say, just watch us.
Jane Fonda, nice to see her.
Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, July 29th, 2025, and our friend Colonel Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Good to be back with you. Seems like we're meeting every week now.
Yeah. Colonel, I want to start with what Donald Trump said about the hostages in Gaza. Here is what he said.
To Bibi Netanyahu, and we are coming up with various plans. We're going to say it's a very difficult situation. If they didn't have the hostages, things would go very quickly. But they do, and we know where they have them in some cases, and you don't want to go riding roughshod over that area because that means those hostages will be killed. Now, there are some people that would say, well, that's the price you pay, but we don't like to say that. We don't want to say that. And I don't think...
Yeah, if they didn't have the hostages, that would be different. How? And in what way that would be different?
They'd kill them faster. If they didn't have the hostages, they'd kill them faster. Although I'm not quite sure how, with this starvation that's taking place now and what they're doing around the humanitarian aid dispensation sites, killing people who are coming for food and water. I don't know how you could go much faster, but it probably would go a little faster because it wouldn't have to worry about the hostages dying when the Israelis blunderbuss their way into a particular area or facility. But it would make no difference, and that just shows how detached at best and how ignorant at worst, and I fear the latter is the case, Donald Trump is about this situation. And his comments about starvation indicate that he's totally out of the loop, too, if he's being truthful. I mean, there's supposed to be comments that finally indicate that Donald Trump maybe has some objections to what Bibi Netanyahu is doing. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. President. It's far worse than just a little bit of starvation that you began to admit to, apparently, because you've seen some scenes that escaped Bibi's propaganda mechanism and got out and you were able to see them. But this is building into a tumult of information that's coming out because a lot of people are seeing it or hearing about it from people whom they trust, and they're reporting on it. And it's not least of which that we have, and I've talked with one or two of them, we have some actual former military people who've gone over there in various capacities, and they're reporting on what they're seeing, to include, as we were discussing before we went on the air, to include IDF soldiers picking out particular people coming to the humanitarian aid disposition point and targeting various parts of the individuals whom they're shooting and killing, to include their testicles, and taking great joy in doing it.
Of course, that is so utterly shocking and disgusting. But of course, there have been so many utterly shocking and disgusting things in terms of Israeli actions in this particular war. They have easily outdistanced, easily eclipsed any of the horrors that they claimed they were subjected to on the first day of the war. And I say that they were claimed because a lot of the claims they made on the first day of the war were just inventions. They were fictions. But what's going on here right now, that's not fiction, that's reality.
No wonder the PTSD ranks in the IDF are increasing on a daily basis. I mean, if they're doing this sort of thing and other soldiers who might not have the same relish for doing that sort of thing, but are nonetheless seeing their compatriots do it, that's what builds your post-traumatic stress ranks, is you're standing there watching your fellow soldiers take joy and delight in shooting the testicles of human beings.
We're Phoenix Energy, a family-owned oil company focused on unleashing American oil from North Dakota and
Larry, here is what the former U.S. Green Beret Anthony Ankylor said from his experience in Gaza.
25 years. I've been shot 3 times in combat. I'm pretty tough. This gets me every time because, to what you're saying, the dehumanization. And what I want to say to the American people and to the people of Israel, I've been there. I have touched them. I have talked to them. The civilians in Gaza that are getting the food, they are starving. They are not animals. They are human beings. And they're being treated like animals. We treat these civilians in Gaza worse, with less dignity than we treated the ISIS fighters that surrendered in Baghouz Faghani in Syria in 2018. This young boy, this is on May 28th on secure distribution site number 2. The aid had been distributed. A lot of people had left. You see behind, there's a crowd of people still with their boxes, kind of getting ready to leave. And this little boy, his name is Amir, and he was standing, he was with the crowd, but he walks over, and you see that first picture on the top right. He kind of walks over to me, and he puts out his hand. And at first I thought like that he wanted more food or something, and I felt bad because I didn't have anything. But I was like, oh, I have nothing. And he puts out his hand, and so I beckoned him to come to me. I said, come here. And he reaches out and he holds my hand, and he kisses my hand. He kisses my hand, and he says, "Shukran." You can see in this picture that this little boy is not wearing shoes. His clothes are falling off of him because he's so skinny. I put my hand on his left shoulder, and I looked at him, and he's looking at me. We're looking at each other in the eyes, and I say to him, "People care. You're a human being, and people care about you. The world cares. That's not Hamas. That's not a Hamas fighter." And I looked at him and I said, "The world cares."
The kid was killed, Colonel, and then he mentions that after he leaves the kid, he get killed by IDF. And you know, we don't have people there to everyday report on what's going on in Gaza, but from the scenes, from pictures, from the videos, we are learning what's going on there.
Yes, and we're hearing from other people like that gentleman there. But I've been hearing this from, for example, Doctors Against Genocide, who have been in Rafah, who have been in Khan Yunis, who have been in surgical wards, who, if you can call them surgical wards, they're usually just a table with a cloth and, you know, maybe a few facilities around, a scalpel or two. And I've been there when I've listened to them talk about, these are surgeons, nurses, practical nurses, nursing assistants, medical personnel in general. And I've listened to them talk with one another, and they've talked with me in the Congress of the United States in front of the one or two congresspersons like Joe Green of Texas who would allow us to come in his office. And I've listened to them tell their stories about the horrors of being in that facility with those people at that time under the conditions they were under and the danger they were confronting. I mean, I have nothing but respect for these doctors and nurses to have gone in there knowing that they were just as apt to lose their lives as were their patients. So this is not new to me, and I hope people listening to me now will understand why I've grown increasingly angry with this little statelet, this heinous little statelet called Israel, and its ruler, the Adolf Hitler of the present day, named Bibi Netanyahu, because that's all I can call him. This is as bad as anything Hitler ever did. I'm sorry, people. It's as bad as anything Hitler ever did.
So he's extremely angry. I have to say, I'm extremely angry also. And I entirely agree with what he is saying. The Israelis have had a record of atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. They just pile on, you know, the atrocities. They obviously are looking for ethnic cleansing and for genocide in this particular situation. And whenever I come face to face with it, I won't say I can't believe what is going on. I do believe what is going on. It is so immensely disturbing and so reprehensible. And the anger of Larry Wilkerson at this is completely justified and is a human response to an absolutely horrific situation.
Carl.
Okay. And you see Nima also is moved by it and moved, you know, by Larry's reaction to it.
Oh, do you understand when it comes to the attitude of the French government? They were talking, they had a meeting with the Saudi Arabia, with the king of Saudi, with the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia. They were talking about some sort of two-state solution. At this stage of what's going on in Gaza, how can they talk about two-state solution? And we know that the West Bank, Israel is capturing all the West Bank, and nobody knows what would happen to Gaza.
Sorry.
But how can you,
I started Tai Chi at 50. Now I'm 68, and doctors ask me for advice.
When you see what's going on in Gaza, you talk about two-state solution, and Netanyahu doesn't care about what these people are talking about. And it doesn't seem that the president of the United States, Donald Trump, is caring about anything.
Nor does Macron or Starmer or any of these other people who, under the political pressure that's created by what's coming out now, and I suspect more and more of it's going to come out because Netanyahu's losing his grip on being able to stop everything from flowing out of Israel. He's got groups within Israel now that are saying he's heinous and what he's doing is heinous. He's got groups within Israel, human rights groups, that are suddenly saying, some of them have been saying all along, but now are getting publicity and saying it, that this is terrible what Israel is doing, and that they will rue the day that they did it because they'll never be able to live with this as time goes by. This is all happening. So you got the British, you got the French, you got others in the world, even the Arab countries now, who can't stand this sort of thing flowing out and know it's going to get worse. There's going to be a deluge of this. They're trying to compensate now. They're trying to say things that are positive. They're weak things. Oh, says Macron, we're going to recognize Palestine as a state, but in September. And then you got other people. This is all trying to assuage the guilt that they feel. They don't mean any of this. It's all politically expedient because much of the things coming out now are going to damage their reputations eternally.
So that's absolutely true in every respect. And it's true that their statements they're making now are statements that they're making in order to absolve themselves and their own guilt for allowing this to go on when they could have done something. They could have united and come together, and they could have stopped the genocide. But they were too immoral to do that, and too unfeeling to do that.
Eventually. And so they're trying to take reactive action to...
And too corrupt to do that.
Compensate for that a little bit and maybe assuage it a little bit. I'm sorry, it's not going to work because this is going to be, when Eisenhower and Patton and others went into the death camps at the end of World War II and showed those images and showed the American people and others in the world what Hitler had actually done in those death camps. There was a revulsion across the world that developed. But it shouldn't have been like that because we knew it was going on. We knew it was happening. Maybe we didn't know it to the depth of when Patton walked through one of those camps or Eisenhower walked through one of those camps, but we certainly knew it. And when it sprung on the world was shocked, absolutely shocked. And that's what really prompted a lot of the things that happened at Nuremberg and the trials and so forth. We got away with it. We were the conquering power. We could get away with it. But the world's revulsion was palpable. Well, that's where we are now. We're getting to that point now with Israel. And it's every bit as bad as anything Hitler did in Dachau, Auschwitz, Treblinka, or anywhere else in the death camps. And people are going to realize that eventually. Political leaders are going to try to backfill and compensate. And that's what you're seeing now. It's beginning now.
Colonel, I really believe that with the case of starvation, at least with the case of starvation, the United States can do something, can change what's going on in Gaza.
And the United States could always do something. The United States could have stopped the shipment of arms to Israel, okay, at any time and forced Netanyahu to stop the genocide in Gaza. We could have stopped it at any time. And we can stop the starvation, okay, at any time too. But Trump doesn't want to stop the starvation. He wants the Israelis to hurry up and finish the job. He's indicated that, okay, on a few occasions. That's all he's interested in. Once he finishes the job, of course, he wants to create a resort and build hotels, okay, in Gaza. It's God. It's unspeakable.
And here is what Donald Trump said about the starvation and the role of the United States, what they can do about it.
I think people would have starved. Will I do more aid? Yeah. The U.S. is going to do more aid for Gaza, but we'd like to have other countries participate. We're going to mention that to the European Union today. That's an international problem. It's not a U.S. problem. It's an international problem. And we're giving a lot of money and a lot of food and a lot of everything. If we weren't there, I think people would have starved, frankly. They would have starved. And it's not like they're eating well, but a lot of that food is getting stolen by Hamas.
That's such bullshit. Israeli talking point bullshit.
They're stealing the food. They're stealing a lot of things. You ship it in and they steal it. Then they
Sure, they steal it, which is why one of the prisoners is reporting that his captors are giving him what they can, but they have no food for themselves.
sell it.
Does he know that people are dying because of starvation?
He's listening to Bibi. He's listening to Bibi. He's listening to Miller. He's listening to other people who are listening.
He's listening to Lindsey Graham, his golfing buddy.
To our ambassador in Israel. He's listening to all these people who are lying Netanyahu's lies to him. And he's listening to Bibi, who's nothing but a serial liar. If he really cared, he could do what he's intimating there, the United States is doing, which we are not. But he could. He could put more food on the ground in Israel in a shorter period of time than anybody else in the world. Quit asking others to do it, Donald. Quit asking others to ease and salve your conscience. Quit asking others to relieve the empire of its total and utter complicity in everything Netanyahu is doing. Just do it, you damn idiot. You could put food on the ground quickly. These airplanes dropping food and everything, in addition to being dangerous, pallets landing on people's heads and killing them. And it doesn't take much to kill these people because they can't hardly lift their own foot and walk. They're starving to death. That doesn't help much. You could drive Netanyahu to allow those trucks in. You need 500 trucks a day minimum. You could make that happen. Quit begging others to do it for you, you sorry son of a bitch. Put the food on the ground and stop this bastard Netanyahu from killing these people using food as a weapon of war, which is a #1 war crime. You could do it, but you won't. Because you're an idiot. You're a clown.
He's worse than that. He's an evil idiot clown. Barely human.
Carl, do you think that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Starmer, did they talk about it? What is the
Starmer, the scum of the earth,
position of the United Kingdom in what's going on with this starvation? We know that the European leaders talking about it. It seems that they're more informed about what's going on in Gaza. It's not like Donald Trump. He feels that people are not dying because of starvation. Yeah. They know what's going on.
Get off your ass and do it. If I were Starmer and I saw the images I've seen and know what I know now, and he can't be ignorant of it. He simply can't be ignorant of it. Put a damn British regiment on the ground. Put it on the ground right there in the Philadelphia corridor. Put it on the ground in Egypt. Put it somewhere with food and go in there and tell the IDF, I'll shoot your goddamn ass if you try to stop me. Do something. Tell the United States, you got a military. You use your military too. Trump begging others to do what they need to do. Get your military over there. Shoot those damn IDF soldiers.
Not just their military, but NATO. NATO, get NATO over there. Get them all involved. They're all complicit, okay, in this genocide. They're all complicit.
Netanyahu, Colonel, unfortunately we have to mention him because we have to understand what's the rhetoric on the part of Netanyahu and his administration. They're trying to say that there is no starvation. Whatever goes in Gaza, Hamas is still all of them. And let me play what he said.
Oh, God.
No starvation in Gaza, no policy of starvation in Gaza. And I assure you that we have a commitment to achieve our war goals. We'll continue to fight till we achieve the release of our hostages and the destruction of Hamas's military and governing capabilities. They shall be there no more. We shall not have any more of these massacres. We shall not have any more of these monstrosities. We stand for human freedom and human life, and that is not commensurate with Hamas or with Iran, other Iranian proxies. We have fought this battle together. We shall win it together.
I got news for him. He is not commensurate with human life. He is certainly not commensurate with human kindness, human generosity, and the rule of law. Listen to him using the regal we shall, we shall, we shall. He sounds like Louis the 16th. He is the guilty party here, enormously so. He is as guilty as...
He's worse than Louis the 16th. Louis the 16th was feckless. He, Netanyahu, is an evil, lying sack of shit.
Adolf Hitler and his right-hand man, Reinhard Heydrich, ever was. Ever was. He is as guilty as Hitler ever was. He is slaughtering people. He is using food as a tool of warfare. He's killing them to the tune of, Nima, 200,000 people so far, minimum, half of whom are women and children. And what he's talking about is eradicating the Palestinians so that Smotrich and his boys, who are already there, can start building settlements in Gaza. That's his solution, ultimately. And any residual Palestinians will either be murdered or they'll be pushed off the land. That's his solution. That's what he's aiming for. Now, here's the key, too, to what he was just saying, security-wise. He has not eliminated Hamas. The IDF, in all these atrocities, in all this using food as a weapon of war, has not eliminated Hamas. They are still there. They are still coherent. They're still able to fight, just as is remnants of Hezbollah in Lebanon. And when the time comes and when Israel is truly hard-pressed, and you know how hard-pressed they could be if they resume this war with Iran, the word is finally getting out all through the region. People in Azerbaijan, people in Armenia, people in other places in the region now understand what happened to Israel in the 12-day beautiful war. And they understand that there is another force in that region, not China, not Russia, but Iran, which can take Israel on and do irreparable damage to it. That is probably as powerful an instrument to deter Netanyahu as there ever was, once it gets really thoroughly understood. Unfortunately, he's operating on another area now. He's operating in Syria, he's operating in Gaza and the West Bank. And he knows he has a free hand, at least in the West Bank and Gaza, not necessarily in Syria. That could come to some real problems for him. But he certainly has a...
Well, the Russians have grabbed control of the skies over Syria and not allowing the IDF jets to fly there. That happened in the last 4 or 5 days.
And where is he killing people with the greatest ferocity? In the places where he has a free hand, West Bank and Gaza. And who is aiding and abetting that process? Donald J. Trump in the United States of America. So this is a shrewd evil man. This is not a stupid evil man. He's shrewd, politically and otherwise. Look at what he just did to get Smotrich to stay in his party. He essentially told Smotrich, "You got it, baby. You got it. You know, you've got the West Bank. Well, you got Gaza now. Get your shovels ready, get your bulldozers ready, get everything ready, because a lot of rubble out there, but you're going to populate Gaza. You're going to populate Gaza, and we're going to leave remnants of the IDF there to take care of you in terms of security. We're going to populate Gaza. Gaza's ours now. You happy, Smotrich? Now you'll stay in the coalition? Yeah. That's how they operate, Neiman. That's what they're doing. And God bless a few people who are coming out in Israel now, like these human rights organizations. But I have to say that probably 65 to 70, maybe even 80% of the Jewish Israelis are very, very content with what Netanyahu is planning for Gaza. That's a hell of a comment on the Israeli citizens who are Jewish. A hell of a comment. And it just reminds me again of Joseph Avasar's comment that a Jewish state is not good for Jews. It is not good for Jews. Any kind of theocratic state, in my mind, is not good for the people who compose the theocracy. Religion.
I have to agree with Larry Wilkerson there. Theocratic states are opposed to human rights. They're incompatible with human rights. They're incompatible, with international law. I won't go too far on that because the Iranians seem to comply, with international law. But the degree to which they are a theocracy has been watering down over a period of years as well. So there's that. Okay, but generally speaking, I think theocracies are opposed to human rights and should not be allowed to exist.
Religion is not something to build a government on. But in this case, Israel, it's a bloody, bloody religion.
Teenagers are building businesses with AI, while the only AI you know is ChatGPT. Let's be real. Most people...
Okay, I take exception to that. And the reason why I do is because I don't think the religion itself is bloody. I think the perversion of the religion is bloody. And what's been going on in Israel is a perversion of the religion. They're taking little passages from the Bible and using them to justify genocide. That doesn't mean that the religion, taken as a whole, is bloody. I don't even think that has to be said. Maybe it does have to be said because the Jews haven't had a state in 2,000 years. Okay, but at or around the time of Christ, when the Israelis had a state, it was no more bloody at that time than any of the other states, that time. But certainly, this Israeli state has just developed a perversion of the religion. There's no question about that. It's completely opposed to Jewish values. I don't even consider them to be Jewish anymore, myself.
Larry, Brazil withdrew from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance shortly after joining South Africa's case against Israel. When it comes to here in Brazil, we know that the tone, the government, Lula, has somehow is moving the way that we haven't seen before. He's trying to do something with the case of Israel. But do you feel that this sort of attitude would be pursued, or would be the case for the other Latin America governments? Or
Yes,
the government
absolutely. I do. And I'll frankly, Nima, I am surprised, and I still expect to see more of this, but I'm surprised that countries in the world who are neutral, let's say, or countries in the world who were friendly or even allied with, not formally, but allied with in economics, trade, and other matters of importance, the United States, aren't thinking about this more seriously. The empire is extraordinarily vulnerable right now. And where it is vulnerable most is not Ukraine. It's vulnerable there too, but not to the degree it is in the Levant. Extremely vulnerable, both to propaganda, and I mean positive propaganda. I don't mean that term derisively, and to actual use of power, economic, trade, military even. It's as vulnerable as it's ever been before. So if you are looking for opportunity to slide into some of the slivers of vulnerability that the empire is showing now, there is no more propitious place to do so than Gaza. Whether you flow in with your diplomacy and your comments and your commentary, or whether you flow in with actual power, like trade power, economic power, and so forth, and you suddenly, for example, say, as a couple of countries had, we're not trading with Israel anymore, period. We're not trading with Israel at all, period. I'm not meaning next week or next month. I'm meaning right now to the indefinite future. We're not trading with Israel. If more countries would do that and cite the United States when they do it, and maybe even take some action against the United States with that regard too. How about sanctioning us? Would it mean anything? No, perhaps not if only one little country did it, or two or three. But if half the world did it, we would have to wake up and acknowledge that we're, at least in some ways, wrong. I don't see why more.
If half the world did it, including the European states. If our European allies were to react in this way, to stop trading with the United States, that would have a tremendous impact. Stop trading with us on grounds that we are complicit with genocide.
More countries have not picked up and flowed into these crevices of weakness that the empire is showing right now. I credit Lula. He's a smart man if he's trying to do that. And anyone else in Latin America who wants to do that, because of all the people in the Western Hemisphere who have grievances against the United States, look at what we've done in the Western Hemisphere, even in Chile, in Guatemala, in Honduras, and other places. They are the ones who should be doing it. They're frightened of doing it, I know, because we still have some residual economic power. We still have some, shall we say, predatory capitalist corporations, which are located in key areas of Buenos Aires and other places in Latin America. But now's the time. Now's the time. Jump on the bandwagon. Start doing things that oppose the empire gone amok. And I'm not just saying that from a perspective of the present time. I'm saying it from the overall perspective of what I've talked to you a lot of times about before. Power is shifting, and it's shifting dramatically. And it's shifting because the world is shifting toward China, toward Central Asia, toward Russia now, as it has allied itself with China.
Remember what Pepe had to say. Historical shifts. Larry Wilkerson thinks that too, and he's been talking about it from time to time. The shifting of power back to where it was for most of the last 3,000 years, to Asia. Okay.
Russia has always been a big power sitting there on a massive landmass, trying to figure out which way it wanted to go, east or west, east or west. Do I want to go south? Looking south a lot now with the Caucasus and other things kind of cooking. But the real impetus is east and west. And now the power is flowing.
This is Honey with Superpowers by Manakora. It's your daily dose of wellness.
Eastward. And everyone that understands that is going to come out a whole lot better than those who don't understand that, because those who understand it can accommodate it. Those who don't understand it are going to fight it. Let me read you something.
Back in history now, in the early 1940s, the idea arose, or the question arose: who lost China? We lost China. Who lost China for us? Whose fault was it? Okay, the Republicans tried to hang it on the Democrats. Okay, I have a question. Who lost Russia for the West? Who lost Russia for the West? What would our situation be like today if Russia had turned towards the West, okay, instead of the East? If the West had accepted it when it wanted to join up after the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s? What if Bill Clinton lost Russia? George Bush lost Russia. It was their fault.
I don't want to bore your listeners, but this is something I wrote right after I had read Frankopan's book, The New Silk Roads. And I had read Hugh Pope's book, Sons of the Conquerors. These are two fantastic books that everyone ought to try to get a hold of and read. This is something I wrote in a long piece I did on it. Quote, if you look in, this is in Sons of Conquerors, Hugh Pope's book, the pictures in that book. There's one picture. It's on page, there's 16 pages of pictures, and the pictures themselves aren't numbered. So it's between page 224 and 225. And here's a quote underneath a photo. The Eagle has landed. This is where wary Kazakh police watched the first U.S. paratroopers to land in Central Asia. Those police had no idea what a momentous event they were observing. The first effort to stop this power shift. We might guess it would be a military effort, since today's American empire is fundamentally limited by imperial choice to only two instruments of state power, the military and economic sanctions. This is what I put in the paper after looking at those photographs. Those Kazakh policemen were witnessing the first American effort to stop this. And that's what we're talking about now. Even in the Levant, that's what we're talking about, because the Southern Base Road Initiative for China depends on Iran.
The southern part of the
That's what we're doing.
Initiative.
The empire's trying to stop the Northern Base Road Initiative, the Southern Base Road Initiative, Central Base Road Initiative, which is Ukraine, proxy war with Russia, and the southern one, which depends on Ukraine or on Iran. Now we've got one developing, a fourth one developing, because the Chinese are now trying to get into the Arctic in a significant way. We got one developing along that Northwest Passage, if it is to be actually commercially successful. And of course, who's along most of that passage? Russia. By far, they're along most of the part of that passage that'll be serious and close to land. So we're looking at this game going on, Neiman. This is the great game going on again with a few different players. and the American empire is trying to maintain its imperial reach, and it's failing. So,
and by the way, while we're doing that, we're pissing off our nearest neighbors, Canada, and Mexico. And when we're looking at the Northwest Passage, one of the most important nations in relation to having a part of that passage is Canada. It's clearly Canada. And we're now creating a situation where Canada is looking to other nations for trade, to other nations for collaboration, because of these stupid tariffs, stupid policies of a stupid man. This theme of stupidity will be more present in much of the rest of the program tonight.
all to say, countries need to line up appropriately, or they're going to be left, or they're going to get caught in the wake of the disappearing empire. Now, if the empire were smart, if Washington were smart, if we didn't have a circus in Washington with the center ring featuring the main clown, Donald J. Trump, and on the left in the subsidiary ring, 3-ring circus, you have Marco Rubio, and on the right you have Pete Hegseth. But it's all a circus with no strategy, no policy of significance, and no smartness how to execute either if it had it. So,
and letting China into Canada and China into Mexico in a big way, both countries turning towards China because we've been pissing them off.
So that's where we are now, with an empire that's falling apart and the rest of the world trying to figure out where to go. Now, the empire doesn't.
It's not hard to figure out where to go. It's not hard.
Have to fall apart. If we had small leadership, we could accommodate what's happening in the world, much the way other countries had to accommodate the shift when it went to us. Now, Britain and France and Spain weren't too good at accommodating that. They fought it all along, but they finally had to accommodate it. The British fought it hardest of all. All to say that the world is changing. It's shifting. The Western Hemisphere is going to be a backwater. South America needs to realize it doesn't want to be a part of that backwater. So it's got to do things differently. And it's
Brazil is doing things differently also. It's looking for trade relations, Indonesia. It's looking for stronger relations with China. It's got a transcontinental railroad that's being built to a port that China built, in Peru. And that port has tremendous facilities built by the Chinese, and they're just waiting for that railroad to get through there. And they're going to be shipping goods from the eastern part of Brazil to the western part, and then to Beijing. It's going to be terrific trade going through there.
Got to take itself out of being on the tit of the El Coloso del Norte, the giant in the north.
Also known as the Colossus of the North.
It's that simple, and it's that complex also, of course. And as I've said many times,
I have to emphasize, though, Brazil is getting 2/3 the size in population of the Colossus of the North. So there's a Colossus that's developing there too. And Brazil, in a strong alliance with Mexico, will have equivalent population resources to the United States. And the natural resources of Mexico and Brazil, taken together, are awesome as well. So we're going to have some competition here in this particular hemisphere. And there isn't anything we can do about it. What we would best do about it is accommodate ourselves to it quickly and with a whole heart.
The complicating factor is that the empire has nuclear weapons, 6,000 warheads. What will we do when we wake up to the fact we have a 3-ring circus in Washington and we're losing? What will we do? That's the question of the 21st century in my mind. What will the empire do when it has a leadership that realizes what's happening?
We'll be talking about the answer to that question later on in the stream.
Really realize it. Not the billionaires behind the leadership. They know it's happening. They're part of the reason Trump is there, because they orchestrated his presence there. But if you really want to do something about it, you have to use different instruments than the military and sanctions. You have to use your brain too. And you have to think about a strategy that would accommodate what's happening and accommodate it in a way that's beneficial to you. We're not doing that, Neiman. And as long as we don't do that, then people like Lula, who are smart enough to figure this out, even if they just intuit it, they're going to continue to do things differently.
And don't forget Claudia Sheinbaum, because she's figured it out already.
And they're going to join the BRICS, as it were, or they're going to be in some other consortium in order to ride out the end of the empire. This is tragic for an 80-year-old man like me who devoted his life to this empire in uniform for 31 of those years. To see this happening, to see my country falling apart in front of my face.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you.
And doing things like supporting the Israelis, using the Israelis. My view is we use them, they don't use us. We're using them to do what we need to do, our dirty work in the Levant. Well, we don't need to be doing that. Let that road go through. Let Iran prosper. Let the Chinese prosper. Let all the people in that region benefit from the number one economic power in the world building routes into their midst. Let that happen. Take advantage of it yourself. You're not broken down so badly you can't do something yourself that's positive. But we don't believe that. We believe we have to fight it tooth and nail, and we will. We'll fight it tooth and nail, and ultimately we'll fight it with nuclear weapons. This general that talked about Kaliningrad, Donahue, he's a moron. I go back to Bruce Clark.
He certainly is.
Clark and Sanvith in the Battle of the Bulge, when the Germans broke through and took 16,000 American soldiers prisoners in 10 hours. The Golden Lines Division surrendered entirely to the Germans. And we were holding out at Sanvith, and Sanvith was a newly minted brigadier general, Bruce Clark, who was holding off the 5th Panzer Army and the 6th Panzer Army with his tiny little group that he formed there, ad hoc group that he formed. And in flies an airborne general, Matthew Ridgway, and tells him to do this: round up the troops and put them all in a circle and fight the German armored armies with troops in a circle. Clark tells him, get on your airplane, go. I'm not doing that. And then fights 5 or 6 days of an active defense and pretty much destroys the ability of the Germans to get to Antwerp, the port they were after, fast enough. Well, that's the kind of general that Donahue is. He's a former 18th Airborne Corps commander, and he believes that Kaliningrad can be taken by his airborne troops, with Ukrainian help. He's got Ukrainians helping him. This is insanity, Nima. Insanity. You do that to the Russians, you have started World War III. I think we're already in it, as I've said, but you have started it precipitously. You started it overnight if you do that. And yet here's an army general who supposedly has a head with a brain in it up there saying that we could take Kaliningrad from the Russians anytime we wanted to. and his sinkier commander back in Heidelberg or Stuttgart, wherever they are now, is going along with it. This is insanity, Nemo. You're inviting Putin to participate with you in World War III and to beat your ass.
Larry, with the case of...
Okay, folks, that's it for this video. I thought Larry was magnificent all through this video. The human feeling, the anger, the brilliance of analysis all came through. The generality of his background and the depth of his knowledge about all kinds of things, they all came through in this particular video. Okay, I don't know that I agree that the end of this road is a nuclear war. I think Trump is scared of that and in the end is going to back off. But it's very dangerous, very, very dangerous.
Trump did say that he wanted peace.
Trump did say he wanted peace, but obviously he didn't want peace enough to make peace. He had the opportunity to make peace, but he didn't have the wit to realize what that was going to take, and he didn't have the courage to make peace. But we'll be looking at what Scott Ritter has to say very soon now. And I think Scott thinks that in the end, before we get to it, that Trump is going to back off. I'm going to look at your commentary now and see what's going on. We've got about 18,000 people who have seen this stream. So I think that's cool. Steve Gonzo says, Steve G2 says, imprisoned Israeli soldier Avitar David, currently held in Gaza by Hamas, states, quote, I have not eaten in days. Our scarce food is lentil and beans. Our captors are giving us what they can. And then unquote, Steve Gonzo says, BB, indeed. Steve Gonzo says, I paraphrased, okay, the last part. Steve Gonzo says, Steve G2 says, IDF's even fishing out the aid bottles Egyptian kids floated to Gaza. Their depravity knows no bounds. I agree. Evelina says, yeah, can't go faster to safeguard the hostages, says the president. Is this the rationale for a slow death from starvation that necessarily includes the hostages? Sure. It appears to be. Evelina says, then says they aren't starving. Hamas is stealing the food, suggesting the hostages are getting fed. Well, I don't think he's suggesting that. Maybe he is. God, Yes, Evelina says, freed hostages looked well fed before Israel blocked all food. Evelina, that Hamas is stealing. Steve Gonzo says, but Joe, Canada's anti-Semitic. They deserve tariffs. Anti-Semitic bullshit. Jews in Canada are doing just fine, including the Orthodox Jews up there in Toronto and the Jews, in Montreal. They're all doing just fine. All doing just fine. Let's go back. Try to turn off and on my camera again and see if that stops the freezing. But I don't think it will. Nope. Still frozen. So I'm going to go on with the next video, which is Ritter's Rant number 38.
but there's a reason. You see, we have the President of the United States talking about dead economies, sort of mocking the economy of India and Russia. And you have the former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, talking about the dead hand, which is a system, according to Dmitry Medvedev, doesn't exist. It does, which, if true, if the stories about it are true, represents sort of a fail-safe method of ensuring the total destruction of anybody who dares attack Russia. Now, why would Dmitry Medvedev be speaking about the dead hand, and why is Donald Trump speaking about dead economies? Because they've got into a social media spat. Donald Trump, on his Real Truth social media outlet, put out a posting that was very critical of Russia and India. Basically, talking about Russia's perceived immunity against anything the United States does to its economy, and the notion that India may not bend the knee and yield to American demands that they stop selling oil to Russia. The president seems to be very frustrated by this because he was sold a bill of goods that said that if he threatened Russia's economy by seeking secondary sanctions against nations like India who buy Russian oil, that the Indians would back down, and the Russians, faced with imminent economic collapse, would give in to all of America's demands on what they're doing in Ukraine. Turns out, though, that truth is a lot harder than fiction. This president's not happy about it, and he's not happy about the needling that former president, current deputy of the National Security Council of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, has been giving Donald Trump in this regard. And so he told Dmitry Medvedev that he needs to watch what he says, that he's entering into very dangerous ground. And then Dmitry Medvedev responded on X, what do you mean by dangerous ground? Are you threatening us? And he reminded the United States that maybe Donald Trump should take a closer look at shows like The Walking Dead, which is a show that talks about a zombie-like future in an apocalyptic world, and also reflect on the dead hand, even though, according to Dmitry Medvedev, it doesn't exist. But it does. The dead hand is a system that was devised during the Soviet Union, during the Cold War. It came out of a concern on the part of the Soviets that the United States, with the development of new weapon systems like the Trident missile, which is launched from submarines, that they could get these submarines close enough to Russian shores, fire these missiles on a very flat trajectory that avoided your early detection, and rapidly strike with extreme precision Russia's strategic nuclear forces, thereby decapitating Russia's ability to strike or launch a counterstrike the United States. And you combine this with the ability of the United States using B-52 bombers and Pershing II missiles that would be based in Europe to take out Russian leadership within 7 to 12 minutes of launch of these respective weapon systems. You have the potential for a decapitation strike. So the dead hand was created so that if the United States ever attempted a decapitation strike, the Russians could guarantee that the United States would be destroyed by a Russian nuclear retaliation, even if the decapitation was successful. Fortunately, the Cold War ended. We never had to test the dead hand, but the dead hand is real. It's part of what they call the perimeter system. I know it's real because I inspected missiles coming out of Votkins that were linked to this perimeter system. Modified SS-25 missiles designed to carry not warheads, but rather a radio transmitter that would broadcast the nuclear launch codes if the dead hand system was to be activated. The missiles were real. The broadcast system was real. Dead hand is real, and it exists to this day.
That's firsthand testimony, that the dead hand is real. It's not a bluff.
I think the point that Dmitry Medvedev was making is that, if the United States thinks they can intimidate Russia and by, threatening with a preemptive strike that takes out Russian leadership, think again that Russia will retaliate and it'll be the end of the United States. Why would Dmitry Medvedev even think like this? Well, the problem is we have a president of the United States who believes in his mind that he's capable of threatening Russian President Vladimir Putin. I mean, there's a recording of the president making a statement during the 2024 election where he threatened to bomb the bovine excrement out of Moscow if Putin dared make a move on Kiev. The president, Trump, claims that he made this statement to the president Putin's face. The conversation never took place. It's a figment of Donald Trump's imagination, but the fact that Trump believes that this conversation took place indicates that he believes that he can bully Russian President Vladimir Putin. This president is heavily influenced by advisors in the United States and outside who have bought into the notion of decapitation as a principal element of any military campaign. The Israelis call it the Nasrallah effect, named after the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, which was combined with this pager attack against the intermediate and senior leadership of Hezbollah, led to the collapse of Hezbollah. The United States believes that they can achieve the same result. They tried to achieve it through Israel as a proxy in Iran. It didn't work, but that's only because Israel screwed it up. According to Donald Trump, had America been doing it, we would have successfully decapitated the Iranian leadership. Now, why is decapitation suddenly something that the president's thinking about when it comes to Russia? Is because all of his other policies have failed. The president thought that he could intimidate Russia into backing down in Ukraine. He can't. The president now understands that the strategic objective of achieving the strategic defeat of Russia using Ukraine as a proxy will no longer work. And when confronted with this failure and confronted with the reality that Russia has emerged from the Ukrainian conflict stronger than they went in, Donald Trump now has to either admit that our policy has failed, his policy has failed, or come up with a different way to implement this policy. And he has people advising him that nuclear preemption, a decapitation strike against Russia, is sound policy, is something that should be pursued. The Russians are aware of this, hence Dmitry Medvedev's statement about the dead hand. Look, unless we all want to be dead men walking or dead women walking, we need to find a way to get an off-ramp from this horrible policy decisions being made by the president. This isn't just a social media exchange between a former Russian president and the current American president. This is a statement of the hazards that we collectively face when we talk about U.S.-Russian relations today. We have to change the tenor. We have to change the content of the dialogue. We have to change the direction so that the United States is no longer talking about the strategic defeat of Russia, but finding a way to strategically coexist with Russia, peaceful cohabitation of the world we live in. This is going to require an entirely new lexicon, one that doesn't include concepts of dead economies, failed presidents, dead men walking, or the dead hand. That's my rant. Next time a thought crosses my mind, I'll be sure to let you know. Thanks.
So, what did Trump do after that? I mean, what happened? Okay, that was the first thing. Okay, the dead hand, made clear that if a decapitation strike is attempted, then what would happen is that the United States would be destroyed. It would fail because of the dead hand. So what did Trump actually do? We will see in one moment. But Steve Gonzo says Trump shouldn't think that the video archive of his past immoralities is only in the hands of Mossad. That's true, Steve. Let's go on to our next video now, which is Ritter's rant number 40. We just finished number 38. Here is number 40, which answers the question of what did Trump do after that.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Ritter's Rant. I normally like to do one a day, but today something so, I guess, remarkable has happened that it warrants a second rant. And when I say remarkable, I don't mean in a good way. I mean in a bad way. So the term that we'll be exploring today is durak. Now, that's a Russian word. Let me introduce it to you. Durak, you don't want to call people. The fact is, my wife, if she's been calling people durak, she gets very mad. It means idiot. It's not a nice word, and it doesn't mean idiot in a good way. It means idiot in the worst possible way. So why am I using the term durak, and why have I decided to use the Russian variant of the word? Because I imagine that this is what about 150 million Russians are saying right now about President Donald J. Trump, the American president. Durak, durak, in the worst possible way. Why would they be calling the American president a durak?
Let's get used to it. Durak, durak.
Because according to Donald Trump, he has just ordered 2 Ohio-class submarines, each one armed with a bunch of Trident submarine-launched ballistic missiles, on top of which are loaded pretty powerful thermonuclear warheads. He's ordered.
So he gets a warning that they have the dead hand and that you cannot decapitate them. And what does he do? He orders the decapitation instruments to get in position. Durak.
2 Trident carrying Ohio-class submarines into the appropriate areas. That means to strike Russia. Why? Because of what former Russian president and deputy head of the National Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, tweeted out yesterday in response to some lunacy by Donald Trump about the dead hand. I did a rant about it and discussed it. It's serious. But people should understand that the dead hand is not an offensive nuclear capability. The dead hand happens when, let's see, the United States deploys Ohio-class submarines carrying Trident nuclear missiles to the appropriate areas off the Russian coast and launch a preemptive strike against Russia to decapitate the Russian leadership. And then the dead hand kicks in, firing off code-carrying missiles that sends all the Russian surviving nuclear arsenal towards the United States. So Donald Trump's mad that Dmitry Medvedev dare say, hey, look, we have a dead hand to deal with any preemptive attack by the United States. So what does he do? Deploy the very systems that would carry out a preemptive attack. Durak, durak, durak. The man is an idiot, a certifiable idiot. Now, before we start to panic too much, though, just to reinforce the point that this man is truly a certified durak, let me remind the President of the United States, maybe he doesn't know this already, so I'll just remind him. You already have 4 frickin' Ohio-class submarines on station as we speak. At any given moment, there are at least 4, sometimes 6 Ohio-class submarines deployed in the quote-unquote appropriate areas as a deterrence against other nuclear armed nations like China, Russia, North Korea. They're already there, Mr. President. They're already on station. You don't have to worry about Dmitry Medvedev's words. You don't need to overreact, you durak. You have the capability out there, just like the Russians do. That's why we live in a dangerous world, Mr. President. I mean, this is just kind of foolish stuff. First of all, is he deploying 2 additional submarines? And when he says appropriate areas, are these the standard patrol areas that they have in the Atlantic and the Pacific? Or is he sending them to the forward deployed ones? You know, the ones that the Russians get mad. Now, that's his prerogative as president. But hey, durak, you're telling the Russians that you're sending 2 additional Ohio-class submarines to the appropriate areas. Now imagine if you're the Ohio-class submarine captain and you've just been told to deploy to a forward area. Very dangerous deployment because the Russians are going to have all their hunter-killer submarines out there looking for you. Thank you, Mr. President, for telling the Russians that you're sending us forward to carry out a possible preemptive nuclear strike against Russia. Durak. Not only is it destabilizing, not only is it provocative, a non-conventional area, the Russians are going to be looking for them. You don't want this, Mr. President. You don't want to tell the Russians that you're sending your Ohio-class submarines to the appropriate areas, because all you've told the Russians to do is hunt them down and have a submarine standing off the ass end of it to kill it in case it ever tries to launch a preemptive Trident missile attack against Russia. Durak. Literally, this is just foolish stuff. This is nonsense. I don't know how the Russians are going to respond. Obviously, the appropriate thing to do is to find out what the hell the president's talking about. Is this an escalation, or is the president just having been told, oh, Mr. President, we already have 4 submarines out there. Well, make sure at least 2 of them are ready to go, because he's a durak. He doesn't know that all 4 are ready to go. I don't know what he's doing. Has he ordered these submarines to put on the Russian strike package? Because there was a time when we sort of had our submarines out there and we didn't have the targets programmed in. Does he reprogram the targets? Is he sending the targets as we speak using super secret communication methods with the submarines? I don't know. Why would he say this? Let me remind the president of something he said just a few days ago. I think it was July 29th, in response to a question from a task correspondent, that means a Russian correspondent, about the status of the New START treaty, the last remaining arms control treaty between the United States and Russia. The president said, that's a treaty we don't want to allow to expire. No shit, Sherlock. Why don't you want it to expire? Because you'll have, I don't know, a nuclear arms race, destabilization. So if you have enough brain matter up there to understand that the expiration of the last remaining arms control treaty is a bad thing, why are you responding to the harmless statements of Dmitry Medvedev, who has a history of putting out provocative posts on his X platform, just like you do, Mr. President? He's sort of your Russian doppelganger. You both like to go out there and tweak the other people using social media. But here, what you've done is you've taken harmless poking and you've turned it into Armageddon-like reality. Did you really order 2 Ohio-class submarines to be deployed to the appropriate areas in response to a statement made by a former Russian president? How do you think
You better have not actually done that. Because if those submarines were already deployed, it's okay, because they're not moving and they can't be detected. So the hunter-killer submarines, cannot get them. But if you deploy 2 extra ones there, they're moving to get there. And the hunter-killers can go after them. So
current Russian president should respond to this, Mr. President? Should he send 2 Russian submarines to the appropriate areas in response to your posting? When will it stop? Will you then send American bombers to the appropriate areas? Will you put the Minuteman missile on a high alert?
that's why I called this topic Brinkmanship. This is a return to the Brinkmanship of the Eisenhower period and the beginning of the Kennedy period before, the Cuban Missile Crisis. We haven't had this kind of brinksmanship since then. But we've got it now under this president. It wasn't even so bad. It was starting to get bad under Biden. There was bigger risk of nuclear war then. But this is the worst incident we've had. Sending the Ohio-class submarines with the Trident missiles. God.
Target the appropriate regions in Russia? How do you think they'll respond to that? Could their response be to put their nuclear forces on a higher alert, targeting the appropriate areas here in the United States? And when you say appropriate areas, that means what? You're going to hit them with nuclear weapons. You're threatening a nuclear response against Russia. How does Russia respond to that? Guys, this is stupid. Durak, duraki, multiple duraks. Everybody involved in this needs to take a chill pill and calm down. We aren't supposed to be heading in this direction. And let me also remind the president that you're deploying these nuclear submarines in a moment when you're getting ready to send your special envoy, Steve Witkoff to Russia to meet with the Russians about Ukraine, where you've put on this arbitrary deadline that expires August 8th. Could your deployment of nuclear submarines have anything to do with the hardening of the posture that you have towards Russia? Are you indeed threatening Vladimir Putin and the Russian leadership if they don't bend the knee to your will? Durak, the Russians will never bend the knee. Why are we going through this? I guess this is a good time, as good a time as any, to remind everybody of my Project 38. Now, a lot of people might have thought about Project 38 and said, well, that's nice. It's just a cute little project. Scott Ritter's running around pretending he's trying to save the world. Project 38 is about this very frickin' situation. It derived from the 38 minutes of terror felt by the citizens of Hawaii when a missile was declared to be heading in their direction. Now, we can basically postulate this missile heading in their direction to anybody in the United States and Russia right now. All of you should be concerned about it because the idiot president of the United States, a Durak, has deployed 2 missile-carrying submarines because a former president of Russia got under his skin about a statement made about a theoretical Russian defensive capability.
A statement made through a tweet.
What happens if these missiles are told to fly? If that happens, ladies and gentlemen, it's all over. The world ends. There's no coming back from it. If any of those missiles are launched from the Ohio-class submarine, Medvedev's dead hand becomes a reality. The Russian perimeter system kicks in, and the totality of Russia's nuclear arsenal lands on American targets. And there ain't no calling these missiles back. So if we survive this momentary madness, everybody in America should be asking themselves, how the hell do we stop those missiles from firing?
Some of those missiles, by the way, are hypersonic. Hypersonic. We have no defense against those. But our defenses are probably even against standard ICBMs. They won't work in sufficient quantity to stop the destruction of the United States.
And the answer is Project 38 or something like it. If somebody else out there has a better idea, I'm ready to hear it. I haven't heard a better idea yet. So Project 38 is about what would you do to stop those missiles from firing if you could go back in time 6 months? And what you need to do is promote arms control, nuclear disarmament. That very treaty, New START treaty that Donald Trump said can't be allowed to expire, can't be allowed to expire. And so we need to move forward. We need to get into the ear of the president and remind him of what he said, help reinforce that notion. And that's what Project 38 is about. It's about putting together a team B of experts who will seek an audience with the president or his senior leadership to promote the idea of extending New START, of promoting arms control. The Russians were just asked about this the other day. A deputy foreign minister said, there is no movement on this. There's no discussions. There's nothing. So you can't extend a treaty if there's no movement on it. How do we begin to get this movement? What is necessary to do this? How do we get the Russians to say we're ready to do this? How do we get the United States to say we're ready to do this? And how do we make them come together? I'm not here to, serve as a diplomat. That's not my job. I'm not a negotiator. I'm just a world citizen, an American citizen who's pretty damn concerned about the fact that the President of the United States just ordered 2 nuclear-armed submarines off the coast of Russia, the appropriate areas, in response to a tweet put out by a former Russian president. This is insanity. Insanity. The president wants to be somebody who is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Not if he's a Durak, not if he's an idiot, not if he's promoting nuclear war. Mr. President, if you want somebody to give you this Nobel Peace Prize, if you want to earn this Nobel Peace Prize, then stop promoting nuclear war, stop working to prevent nuclear war, start doing things like seeking the extension of the New START treaty. And if you're an American citizen out there and you want to help push the president in the right direction, go to my Substack page, go to the donations and send a donation to help promote Project 38. It's alive, it's well, it's living, we're moving forward, and there's more need for this project now than ever before because we got a Durak in the White House sending nuclear-armed submarines to the appropriate areas to threaten the Russian government because a former president put out a tweet that made little Donald Trump unhappy. Durak. Anyways, that was my rant. Next time a thought crosses my mind, if we're still alive, I'll be more happy to share it with you.
Not much to comment on there. It's pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. Very important, though. Very, very, very important. Because right now, our lives are on the line. And they depend upon the decision of a Duroc. I just want everybody to know that. The next piece is going to underline the point. It's from the other Larry, Larry Johnson. And the title of it is Trump Escalates Nuclear Threat to Russia, Taking the World to the Brink of nuclear war. It's Brinksmanship. Or Brinkmanship, if you want to leave off the S.
He should remember he wanted peace.
Huh?
He should remember he wanted peace.
He should remember he wanted peace. If you want peace, you have to pay the price of peace. And the price of peace is get off the pot about trying to damage the Russian Federation. If you want peace with Russia, that's what you got to do. Here's a tweet from Donald Trump. Oh, this is from Sonar 21, by the way. And the blog is by Larry Johnson. 1st of August, 2025. That, of course, was yesterday. Trump tweeted, based on the highly provocative statement of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. I mean, what's he mean? How stupid is that? He's telling you there's a dead hand defensive system there. So why is that foolish and inflammatory? That he's warning you about a dead hand. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. That's because you're a Durac. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald Trump is behaving, Larry says, like some drugged out teenage girl with his social media posts. Trump, the wannabe, quote, art of the deal, unquote, emperor, is panic posting the world to the threshold of nuclear war and taking other actions that Russia can only view as the U.S. preparing to attack the motherland. The latest escalation started with this tantrum by Trump. It's another tweet. I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together for all I care. We have done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high, among the highest in the world. Likewise, Russia and the USA do almost no business together. Let's keep it that way and tell Mr. Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still president, to watch his words. He's entering very dangerous territory. Trump should learn, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. Schmuck. Anyway, Mr. Medvedev, who is an Olympic-class troller, punched back with this warning. About Trump's threats against me on his personal network Truth, which he banned from operating in our country. If some words the former president of Russia caused such a nervous reaction from such a formidable U.S. president means Russia is right in everything and will continue on its own path. And about the dead economy, quote unquote, of India and Russia and the, quote, entering dangerous territory, unquote, well, let him remember his favorite movies about, quote, the walking dead, unquote, as well as how dangerous the non-existent in nature, quote, dead hand can be. Trump, in a continuing display of ignorance, apparently took this as a Russian threat to launch a preemptive attack on the United States. The Russian, quote, dead hand, unquote, also known as the quote, perimeter, unquote, system, is an automatic or semi-automatic nuclear command and control system developed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War and is reportedly still operational today. Its purpose is to guarantee a retaliatory nuclear strike against an enemy, even if Russia's leadership and command structure are destroyed in a decapitating attack. Specifically, what Medvedev was trying to do was to warn Trump that a decapitation strike on Moscow would still produce a retaliatory strike on the United States. Instead of keeping his big mouth shut, Trump bombastically huffed and puffed like an impotent big bad wolf and announced that 2 nuclear submarines were heading towards Russia, just because he got a roasting online from the former president of Russia. Sorry, didn't mean to get us to naked capitalism. I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. I think the foolish and inflammatory statements, for those he needs to look in the mirror. We do not know if this means that Trump has dispatched 2 additional submarines to reinforce the ones already in the Atlantic and the Pacific, but simply making this announcement represents a threat to Russia, a threat that Russia must take seriously. This is not the first escalation on the nuclear front. During the last 2 weeks, there have been 2 actions, both presumably endorsed by or carried out per a presidential order, that have pushed the doomsday clock closer to midnight. The first was a speech to NATO by General Christopher Donahue, the current head of the U.S. Of the European Command. The second was the U.S. reversing its policy on nuclear weapons in Europe. Donahue, during the mid-July 2025, during the Association of the U.S. Army Conference in Germany, General Donahue stated that NATO and U.S. allied forces now have the capability to, quote, neutralize, unquote, or, quote, take down, unquote, the Russian exclave of Leningrad from the ground in an unprecedented and much faster time frame than previously possible. He described it as being about 47 miles wide and surrounded on all sides by NATO country, making it vulnerable to ground operations. The statement was made in the context of NATO's, quote, Eastern Flank Deterrence, unquote, plan, which aims to bolster ground-based military capabilities and readiness in the Baltic region. But Donahue emphasized the importance of the land domain in modern warfare and NATO's enhanced ability to counter Russia's mass, and also momentum problem, unquote, using new capabilities developed based on lessons from the conflict in Ukraine. However, he did not provide specific operational details of how this capability would be executed. Donahue's ill-advised remarks ignited a furious reaction among politicians and citizens in Russia. Specifically, Leonid Slutsky, chairman of the Russian State Duma's International Affairs Committee, warned that an assault on Kaliningrad would be considered an attack on Russia itself, triggering all necessary retaliatory measures under Russia's nuclear doctrine. The Russian side, views Kaliningrad as strategically vital, and any NATO attack on it is a major escalation, possibly provoking a nuclear response. Words are one thing, but actions speak louder than words, and Trump authorized an action that leaves the Russians with no alternative but to conclude that the U.S. is preparing to attack Russia. He ordered sending nuclear weapons to Europe. B-6112 gravity bombs. Throughout the 1990s, the U.S. closed or consolidated many bases. Weapons were withdrawn from some national bases and concentrated at fewer main air bases rather than fully returned to the U.S. For example, bombs were moved from minor bases in Germany, Italy, and Turkey to Ramstein, Gede Torre, and Incirlik, respectively. All U.S. Nuclear weapons were withdrawn from Greece in the early 2000s, and the last bombs were taken away from the UK's RAF Lakenheath around 2007, ending more than 50 years of U.S. Nuclear presence there. Now, in a major reversal, the U.S. has deployed the B-6112 gravity bombs to Europe. Deployment locations for B-6112 gravity bombs in 2025. RAF Lakenheath, in the United Kingdom. The B-6112 returned to the UK for the first time since 2008. With deliveries confirmed to Lakenheath in July of 2025. The Kleine Brogel Air Base in Belgium, the Berchel Air Base in Germany, the Aviano and the Gedi Air Bases in Italy, the Volcal Air Base in the Netherlands, and the Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. These bombs are now distributed across these 6 main bases in 5 NATO countries, with around 100 to 150 US B-61 bombs forward deployed in total. The deployment to RAF Lakenheath in the UK represents a significant strategic signal, as it marks the first return of U.S. tactical nuclear weapons to British soil in over 15 years. By the way, I think this is really provocative because the Russians could go after those bases, with the Oreshniks in order to get rid of the nuclear bombs. They could destroy those bases with Oreshniks. They won't even have to use, any nuclear weapons. Going off the article, what do you think Russia's doing? Sitting on its ass and ignoring these provocations, or taking the necessary preparations to eliminate these threats if things heat up? Larry says, I am betting on the latter course of action. Trump's announcement about the submarines had not been made when Colonel Wilkerson and I chatted with Nima this morning. I think I won the shirt competition. We discussed a range of issues, but agreed on one thing. Trump's foreign policy is a mess. I absolutely agree. We don't see either Nima's shirt or Larry's shirt here, so we'll have to go to the video to see those things. Ray and I had a chance to react to Trump's submarine decision during our weekly chat with the judge. And the video on that is right here for those who are interested. And there's a link to it, of course, in the description. But I'm going to end this blog there. We are absolutely miraculously pretty much on schedule right now. It's 11:17. And according to my schedule, we've got 2 more pieces and 45 minutes to go. Really pretty amazing considering all we had to cover here tonight. But here's a piece by Alistair Crook, very significant one, I think, from the Unser View. Is the Trump, quote, mystique, unquote, is it broken? Does MAGA sense betrayal? Okay, this is from July 29th, 2025. It's a fairly short piece. Okay, there's a graphic Jeffrey Epstein client list blowing off Trump's hat, the MAGA hat, and his hair in the breeze. Alistair starts, the Epstein cloud is actually metastasizing and becoming a rallying point for deep-seated popular alienation from certain ruling strata. The public begrudgingly has become resigned to accept that their rulers, quote unquote, routinely lie and steal. But nonetheless, they, particularly within the MAGA faction, have dimly come to understand that there may be vice within the body public which they regard as too detestable to imagine. People have caught on that Trump was in one way or another, even as a bystander, linked to the whole degraded culture. Yes, indeed. This is not likely to pass easily, or perhaps to pass at all. Trump was elected to drain all such tangled webs of interlinked power structures, oligarchy, and of intelligence services acting to unseen interests. That's what he promised. America first. Distraction from Epstein likely won't work. The exploitation, abuse, and destruction of the lives of untold numbers of children in the pursuit of power, wealth, and diabolical debauchery cuts to the deepest quick of moral being. It cannot be distracted away by pointing to other elite, vile monetary and power plays. The abuse and worse inflicted on children stands apart in its own particular hellish category. I guess I have to say here, I think that might be pretty terrible, but it pales compared to the complicity with genocide in Gaza. I mean, that's in its own worst hellish category, and Trump is up to his ears in that. Trump may say that he's been nothing that's legally wrong, but the point is that he's now tainted very seriously, says Alistair Crook. He may consequently be entering presidential lame duck territory, barring some Deus ex machina occurrence sufficient to deflect public attention. Excuse me. Just to be clear, it is in Trump's character to mightily resist becoming a, quote, lame duck, unquote, president, and here lies the geopolitical danger. Trump needs headline distractions, and he needs, quote, wins, unquote. However, he is at a weakened point now where the security state and its congressional allies are seizing more control. Equally, many in the nexus that links politicians and officials in the US, the UK, and Israel to deep business and intelligence ties will be extremely adverse to their exposure. Individuals, including the extreme, including the imprisoned, Ghislaine Maxwell, may prove dangerous, like a drowning man who in his panic seizes on the nearest person only to drown the both of them. Trump's narrow-minded foreign policy has taken the president's foreign policy initiatives into a cage whose bars have names such as arrogance and hubris. On Ukraine, Trump has given to Moscow what is effectively 50 days to capitulate to the Kellogg ceasefire the ultimatum or to face consequences, while a third-party 100% sanctions affecting mostly China and India's energy imports from Russia have been utterly dismissed by China and likely will be by India too. Trump will be under pressure from his hawks in Congress to do something to inflict pain on Russia. The problem is that the war chest is empty. Neither the US nor Europe hold the weapons inventory of any consequence to the war. Even were they to pay and order missiles or other weaponry now, it would be months until delivery. Trump, however, needs quick wins, diversions. Absent any meaningful inventory, Trump can only effectively escalate by using long-range missiles targeting Moscow or St. Petersburg. Tomahawk 2,000-kilometer range missiles are in the U.S. inventory and were discussed by Team Trump. David Ignatius has reported. But what if these elderly Tomahawk missiles are easily shot down by Russian forces? Well, then there is a void, a serious void, because there is nothing between the provision of token items of weaponry, a handful of Patriot missiles, to the U.S. pre-positioned tactical nukes that could be launched from fighter jets stationed in Britain. All this, at this point, Trump would be hurtling towards a big war with Russia. Is there a plan B? Well, yes, it is to bomb Iran again as an alternative to escalating against Russia. Iranians think that another strike on Iran is likely, and Trump has said that he might do just that. So Iran is all out preparing for such an eventuality. It is quite possible Trump has been briefed that the consequence of major strikes on Iran would be effective missile-imposed demilitarization of Israel, causing profound consequences in the political system of the U.S. as well as the region. It is also quite possible that Trump disregards such briefing, preferring to see Israel as, quote, so good, unquote, the exclamation he made as the Israeli sneak attack on the 13th of June was underway. And in the Middle East right now, it looks as if Netanyahu is pulling the strings for Trump. Gaza is already a scandal, a war crime scandal, with every prospect of getting worse. So Max um, uh, reports, I'm speaking, okay, Blumenthal here, reports that, quote, when Tucker Carlson alleged that Epstein had ties to Israel intelligence, and that this fact explained why Trump is covering up the Epstein affair, the Israelis seemingly took fright. Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, was summoned, okay, to declare that he had dealt every day with the Mossad and that Jeffrey Epstein did not work for the Mossad and was not, okay, an Israeli agent. He then threatened Carlson, saying that, quote, we won't stand for this, unquote. The Israeli Minister for Diaspora Affairs also denounced Tucker Carlson. It is like the relationship between the U.S. conservative movement and Israel is cracking up, over Jeffrey Epstein, unquote, Blumenthal suggests. Netanyahu perhaps senses trouble ahead for Israel and the U.S. as young Americans and MAGA followers turn on Trump for having betrayed America first, quote unquote, for, quote, co-owning, unquote, the Gaza massacre, the Israeli-U.S.-led Syrian sectarian civil war, the bombing of Iran, and the despoilation of the despoilation of Lebanon. 81% of Americans, polls suggest, want all documents related to Epstein released. 2/3, including 84% of Democrats and 53% of Republicans, think the government is covering up evidence regarding his client list, quote unquote, and death. Trump's disapproval rating stands at 53% currently. Netanyahu is perhaps consequentially on a hurried rampage to impose, quote, greater Israel, unquote, quote, imposed, unquote, because the original Abraham Accords were ostensibly an agreement to normalize with Israel. Today, under military threat, Arab states are being compelled to accept Israeli terms and subjugation to Israel. It represents a travesty of the former Israeli notion of an alliance of the minorities. Today, the minorities, quote unquote, sometimes fractured ones, are deliberately being set one against the other. Okay, the U.S. and Israel have again introduced ISIS 2.0 into the Middle East. The executions of Alawites, Christians, and Shia in Syria are the direct consequence. The prospect is of a devastated Middle East, with only the monarchies in the Gulf serving as obedient islands amid the wider landscape of internecine war, ethnic killing, and balkanized politics. And he ends, with a new Middle East question mark, and with a link to his Monday video with the judge, which we don't have to play here. So, this blog is an amazing attempt, to relate all the different threads that are happening to Trump to the possibility that he is feeling utterly desperate for quick wins and for diversions from all of his failures. So desperate that he will rely on, tomahawks, and also nuclear weapons on the tomahawks. But we now know that, since this was written, by Alistair, he is also desperate enough to be public in ordering Ohio-class submarines to get into position to attacking Russia, with Trident missiles. That, of course, would create a heavy nuclear war, the nuclear war to end all wars. It's pretty desperate because it would not be a win for the United States. It would be a big loss for both the United States and for Russia, okay, and for everyone. The question is Trump sufficiently desperate to make the order to start, a nuclear war? Now, Scott Ritter has said in, previous videos that he thinks that in the end, Trump is going to back off and that he's going to make a call to Putin. I hope against hope, okay, that this is true, that he makes a call, okay, and that he backs off. That is the best thing that could happen to the United States, and it is the best thing that could happen to Russia, and it is the best thing that could happen to Europe. It's the best thing that could happen to all of us, because a serious nuclear exchange between Russia and the United States would probably end human life on Earth. So this is really serious. And I think that this whole decision is in the hands, okay, of Donald Trump, whom Scott Ritter has correctly called, called a Duroc, but who also might just be afraid enough of a nuclear war that in the end he will do the right thing. I hope so. So Robert Copeland says, I bet most people don't care about BRICS as they care about healthcare, jobs, Social Security, okay, and housing. Now, that may be true, and of course, I quite understand that they would care more about healthcare, jobs, Social Security, and housing. Therefore, from their point of view, there is no justification for a war on BRICS or for attempts to stop BRICS. What should be taking place instead is using our powers as a monetary sovereign to provide what the public wants in relation to healthcare, jobs, Social Security, and housing. And not only that, but to reduce our military spending to get out of Europe and to get out of other areas of the world, to come home, to worry about the defense of our country directly, and to present a collaborative face, okay, to the rest of the world. And we need to stop this tariff nonsense also, because if we need to favor industries in this country, we can use subsidies to do that. If the World Trade Organization is opposed to that, we can always withdraw from the World Trade Organization, which is a neoliberal type of organization anyway. So we don't need to be a part of it, and we don't need to obey what they want us, okay, to obey. We can subsidize to our heart's content, and that will be fine with other nations as long as there are no tariffs. So we should pursue free trade, okay, with them. And if we want to build industries to compete with their industries, we can do it through subsidies. Evelyn says we won't get those things if U.S. continues to warmonger to stop the BRICS. I completely agree. And Robert Copeland says a good trade deal, benefits both countries. I think you're missing the point, Robert, which is that free trade is likely to benefit both countries, and where it is not a benefit because it has a negative impact in the long run on certain industries, you compensate for that through subsidies. You don't compensate for that through tariffs. So let us get on to the last of our articles. We've got about 25 minutes left in my schedule, and I allocated exactly 25 minutes to this last really great article, which is from, well, all the pieces tonight have been from our favorites, but this particular piece, which I will share the screen for now, is from Pepe Escobar. We started the show with Pepe, and we're going to end the show with a blog of his, from originally published in Strategic Culture, but which has appeared in Un's Review, where I picked it up. And it's a good thing I got it from there, because otherwise Facebook would ban the stream. Anyway, the title of it is Chinese Foxes, but also American Sharks and European rodents. So foxes, sharks, and rodents. So Pepe was motivated by animals in writing this blog. So here are the flags of the United States, China, the EU, and Russia in this graphic. The caption says, "The BRICS Lab has a nonstop, ever-adapting creative spirit. Beats tariff dementia every time." The fourth plenary session of the Communist Party of China has been scheduled by the Politburo for October. No precise data announced, probably 4 days during the second half of October. That's when Beijing will be deliberating, the lineaments of its next 5-year plan. The plenum should be attended by over 370 Central Committee members of the party, of the elite of the party. Why this is so crucial? Because China is the undisputed top target alongside top BRICS members of the new universal law devised by the empire of chaos. I tariff, therefore I exist. So the next 5-year plan will have to take into consideration all vectors deriving from the new, quote, law, unquote. The plenum will take place a few weeks after Beijing stages a grand parade to celebrate the end of World War II. President Putin is one of Xi's, guests of honor. Moreover, the plenum will be right before the annual APEC, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, starting October 31st in Seoul. This summit carries a window of opportunity for a direct face-to-face Trump-Xi meeting, which the circus ringmaster for all his posture and tergiversations is actively pursuing. I forgot what tergiversations means. That's quite a word, that Pepe has used. Let me refresh my memory on what it means. Tergiversations. refers to the act of changing or shifting one's position, particularly in a way that is evasive or deceitful. It can involve abandoning a cause, party, or belief, or employing ambiguity and equivocation to avoid a direct or an honest answer. It can also mean using ambiguous language to falsify or misrepresent some information. So going back to Pepe, which the circus ringmaster, for all his posture and tergiversations, is actively pursuing. The plenum will have to carefully weigh how a de facto trade, tech, and geopolitical war between the U.S. and China will only get more incandescent. As much as Made in China 2025 revealed itself to be a staggering success, maximum pressure from Trump 1.0 notwithstanding, new Chinese wave tech decisions taken in 2025 will define the roadmap ahead on everything from AI to quantum computing, biotechnology, and controlled nuclear fusion. Next section is called, I Am So Thrilled to Be Your Lackey. I wonder what that's about. Everything that matters on trade and tech will be decided between the two economic superpowers. By now, it's clear that a third potential actor, the EU, has simply committed serial suicide. Let's start with the China-EU summit on July 24th, which featured, among other niceties, Beijing protocol deigning to send at best a lowly tourist bus to greet the delegation from Europe, and Xi Jinping, for all practical purposes, ending the summit before schedule in a message widely interpreted across the global south as, quote, we have no time to waste with you clowns, unquote. That's exactly what the circus ringmaster wanted. Then came the EU-US get-together, which sealed in a spectacular fashion the already accelerated phase of Europe's century of humiliation. That's a reference to the century of the same thing that the Chinese suffered between 1850 and 1948. It starts with Trump de facto erasing Russia from the EU's energy future. Brussels has been forced, Mafioso, quote, offer you can't refuse, unquote, style, to buy 250 billion of overpriced U.S. energy a year, every year for the next 3 years, and in the process be slapped with 15% tariffs, okay, and like it. Of course, Brussels could have rejected that. It could have simply worked with Germany to get the Russian oil flowing again from Nord Stream. And it wouldn't have had to buy $250 billion worth of overpriced U.S. energy every year. And as for the tariffs of 15%, it could have slapped then reciprocal tariffs of 15% on U.S. goods. So smashing Nord Stream 2 going on with Pepe's article, an operation carried out by the previous DC Auto Pen administration, had a clear imperial purpose from the start. On top of it, the EU must pay for its already lost in Ukraine by buying unlimited amounts of overpriced US weapons to the tune of 5% of GDP. That's when Trump imposed NATO to impose on the EU, follow the money. And NATO just accepted that instead of kicking out the US. Yet, whatever the quote deal advertised with the profusion of superlatives by the circus ringmaster, the numbers don't add up. The EU spent a hefty 375 billion euros on energy in 2024. Only 76 billion euros of these were paid to the US. This means the EU would have to buy 3 times more US energy over the next 3 years. And only LNG made in USA. No Norway, for that matter, which sells cheaper pipeline gas. Defying reality and obviously not put in check by meek European mainstream media, the toxic Medusa in Brussels, that of course is van der Leyen, vociferated that U.S. LNG is cheaper than Russian pipeline gas. Give me a break. There's no way it's cheaper than Russia pipeline gas. But going on with the article, Moscow is not breaking a sweat because its major clients are all across the area of Eurasia. As for the Americans, they will not divert all their exports to the EU, as European refineries can only handle a limited supply of American shale oil. Moreover, there's no way bureaucrats could force the European energy companies to buy American. So to round up their figures, they will have to buy from somewhere else. That would be Norway and even Russia, assuming the Russians will be interested. I think the Russians seem to be interested because they got Nord Stream 2.0, at least one of the pipelines, running again. I assume they didn't just do that for fun, but hoped to make some sales to Europe. Trump 2.0 was clever enough to exempt some sectors from the tariff dementia, such as aircraft and aircraft parts, semiconductors, critical chemicals, and some agriculture. Of course, these are all part of strategic supply chains. The only thing that really mattered overall was to lock up Europe as a massive buyer of American energy, and force them to invest in U.S. infrastructure and the industrial military complex. That points to the only way to escape, quote unquote, the tariff dementia. When faced with a, quote, offer you can't refuse, unquote, you don't refuse, you take it, like it, and offer all sorts of investment in the U.S. Ancient empires used to force their partners to pay tribute. Welcome to the 21st century version. After all, what does Europe have to offer as leverage? Nothing. No European country on the global tech top 10. Not even a European search engine or globally successful smartphone or operating system or streaming platform or cloud infrastructure, not to mention no semiconductor producer, and only one car maker among the global best-selling top 10. I assume that's either Mercedes. Must be Mercedes, right? All aboard, quote, directed improvisation. If the U.S. sharks gave the EU rodents literally nothing, foxy China was benign enough to give just a little bit of something, a blah, blah, blah on climate change. The end result for the whole world to see The EU is a sorry player carrying less than zero strategic autonomy on the global chessboard. It is royally ignored on the empire's forever wars from Ukraine to West Asia, and it lectures Beijing when it is totally dependent on Chinese, on raw materials from China, industrial equipment, and complex supply chains for green and digital tech. UN Ang from Singapore is a professor of political economy at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. She may need to toe the strict lines of U.S. academia, which is exceptionalist by definition, but at least she's capable of some valuable insights. For instance, quote, we're all suffering from an attention deficit. We used to read books, then articles, then essay, then blogs, and now it's further reduced to tweets of 280 characters. So you can imagine what sort of messages fit in that tiny space. It has to be simplistic, unquote. That cuts to the heart of how the circus ringmaster is conducting his foreign policy, ruling via an accumulation of nonsensical posts. UN reaches more serious territory when she comments on how China wants to retire an old economic model, which was highly dependent on low-cost exports, construction, and real estate. It wants high-tech, innovation-driven development, unquote. That's exactly what will be discussed at the heart of the plenum in Beijing in October. So UN also notes how, quote, back in the 1980s and 1990s, unquote, China could, quote, imitate the late industrialization model in East Asia. Today, there aren't many role models. China itself has become a trailblazer, and other countries are seeing it as a role model, unquote. Hence, her concept of, quote, directed improvisation, unquote, being conducted by the leadership in Beijing. They know the preferred final destination, but still need to test all possible paths. The same, by the way, applies to BRICS, via what I defined as the, quote, BRICS lab, where all sorts of models are being tested. What matters above all is a nonstop, ever-adapting creative spirit. Beats tariff dementia every time. And that ends the article by Pepe. I consider this a brilliant article. And of course, that line, what matters above all is a nonstop, ever-adapting creative spirit. We need to regain that spirit here in the United States. We no longer have it. We no longer have it. We have to reintroduce it. The oligarchs have killed the nonstop, ever-adapting creative spirit in the United States. We may have a way, of getting it back. A friend of mine and I have been talking about something. I'm not ready to reveal what it is yet, but it would be important in recreating the nonstop, ever-adapting creative spirit, which is extremely necessary for the United States. So, on that note, I will end this particular blog. and I will attend to your final comments. And here we are. We have 18,506 views for this stream, which is somewhat satisfying. Robert Copeland says, and this looks like the last comment of the evening, when was the last time the tariffs ever worked? And I can't think of a time a tariff, ever worked. Or I can't think of it either, Robert. But I am, of course, extremely anti-tariff, as you probably gathered by now. Before I say goodnight, I want to ask everybody to follow me on Twitter. I need followers on Twitter. I also need like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, as well. So please, if you can, those who are watching, please do follow me on Twitter. I need a huge number, of followers there. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming and for watching. And Steve Gonzo says, technology trending, Palantir, 15.5K post. And he says also, PSA, Palantir just became the 20th richest company. But what happens to Palantir, if Israel is destroyed? There goes a huge chunk of, Palantir business if that happens. But that destruction may come about if the Israelis make the mistake of attacking Iran once again. By the way, Palantir was instrumental in the recent attack, on Israel, and in the success that Israel had in the first day, of the war. So with that, I'm going to leave, for the night. I am actually 1 minute ahead of schedule, which is quite a novelty for me. I wish you a wonderful weekend, and I will be back on Tuesday with what I think will be more very, very good stuff. So I will end the stream now. Have a wonderful day tomorrow and a wonderful day on Monday. And Steve Gonzo waves goodbye. Thank you, Steve. Or Steve G2 in this case, waves goodbye.